with a word of prayer. Let's go ahead and pray the prayer we see upon the screen. Please pray with me. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, and kindle in us the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and we shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. Amen. We're in the middle of a series of messages on the Serenity Prayer. I want to invite you to pull out your outline for today. On one side is the Serenity Prayer, on the other side is your outline for today. Last week we were talking about God-given acceptance, accepting the things I cannot change, we were talking about. And to be able to accept those things, not with an attitude of bitter resignation, but learning to trust in God's love and God's faithfulness. I'll share with you if you missed that message. It's on video on our website, so you're welcome to go there. But today we turn from accepting the things we cannot change to asking God for the courage to change the things that we can. The courage to change the things we can. And that's the part of the prayer that we're going to look at this morning. God, grant me the courage to change the things I can. So today's topic then is courage. And you see that on your outline this morning. I'm reminded of a funny story happened a number of years ago. It was with the Chicago Bears football team. And they were losing a game at halftime. And their coach at the time was Mike Ditka. And he wanted to graphically illustrate the importance of courage, of being tough, of being tenacious, and so forth. And so he stands to address the team at halftime in the locker room, and he reaches his hand into this bucket. The team doesn't know it, but in this bucket is a snapping turtle. Okay? A snapping turtle. And the snapping turtle clamps onto his hand, and he stands there and talks to the team with this snapping turtle on the meat of his hand. And they're all looking astounded at him as he's continuing to talk. He assured them that they could do whatever they needed to do with great courage in their life for the balance of the game. And that they could do the same thing if they were committed and if they summoned up the courage in their lives. He then went, and as he was talking, asked for a volunteer. And after an extended silence, William Perry, remember William Refrigerator Perry? Okay, he stood up and he volunteered to go next, meaning to have the Ditka meant for the turtle to snap onto him. Ditka thanked him for his courage, and he said he would proceed as soon as they could pry the turtle off of his hand. Refrigerator Perry then replied to the coach that there was no reason to remove the turtle. Just stick out your other hand, and I'll bite that one. Sometimes courage is not exactly what we expect. The Bible is filled with stories of men and women who summoned up great courage. And on your outline, I've mentioned two of those people. One is Moses. And Moses ended up being a person of great courage, but that didn't mean that he wasn't without his fears. Listen to this exchange between Moses and God in Exodus chapter 4. Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." The Lord said to him, "Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, and I will help you speak and will teach you what to say." But Moses said, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else." And the Lord's anger burned against Moses and said, "What about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and his heart will be glad when he sees you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth, and I will help both of you speak, and he will teach you what to do. And he will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if it were your mouth as if you were God to him. But take his staff in your hand so that you can perform the signs with it. See, Moses didn't want any part of that, did he? Huh? He wasn't courageous at all. Or look at David in 1 Samuel chapter 17. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine," meaning Goliath. "Your servant will go and fight him." And Saul replied, "You're not able to go out against the Philistine and fight him. You're a little more than a boy. And he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he defies the armies of the living God," David continues. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Courage. Courage is oftentimes a challenging thing for all of us, isn't it, huh? And there's one thing that we need to understand about courage, and that is what it is and what it's not. Courage is not the same thing as fearlessness. Courage is not the absence of fear, you see. There are some people who are daredevils, for instance. They literally have no fear. They'll ski off a 100-foot cliff. They'll jump their motorcycles over a canyon. Seems like nothing scares them. They're fearless, all right, but for all the wrong reasons. Most daredevils lack fear because either one, they're operating with an overblown and utterly misplaced confidence in their own abilities, or number two, they're totally ignorant and unrealistic about the real dangers that are before them. You see, fearlessness for a daredevil has nothing to do with courage. But the fact that someone is afraid doesn't mean that they lack courage. In fact, where there isn't any fear, there can't be any courage. Because courage is born out of fear, you see. General George Patton once said, "Courage is simply fear holding on for 5 minutes longer." Sometimes it's just holding on a little longer. And the reality is that we'll never find true peace and serenity, which is what we're talking about in this sermon series, by running from our fears. That's how people find what we call in the past couple of weeks worldly peace or false peace, by trying to push fear away or stuffing it down or trying to cover it up with something else. That'll never work. You see, the journey to true serenity is a journey through fear, not around it. Real courage means hanging in there despite your fear. Despite the fear that runs through our stomach like an electric current. Despite the fear that our knees sometimes feel like rubber. The only way you conquer fear is by facing whatever it is you want to avoid. The only way you conquer fear is by allowing yourself to feel the fear. And by hanging in there to face the fear for 5 minutes longer. That's courage. That's what we call courage. The fact of the matter is, everybody has fears. And I bet if I were to share my list of fears with you, it would probably look pretty much like your fears. Most everybody is afraid of other people's disapproval. Many of us are afraid of looking stupid, or being sick, or injured, or we're afraid of economic hardship, or we're afraid of losing a loved one. We're afraid of being rejected. We're afraid of pain. We're afraid of dying. The human race has lived in the shadow of those fears from the beginning of time. But think about how those fears have limited our experience in life. The marvelous deeds that have never been done, and the amazing thoughts that have never been thought because of the power of those fears. Think of who you might be and what you might do if it weren't for your fears. What is it that's frightening you the most in your life? If you can identify the fear, think about how it's limiting you, how it's fencing you in. Fear doesn't want you to climb that mountain, you see. Fear wants to rattle your life and my life, to convince us to take our eyes off the summit that we're searching for, to settle for a dull existence. To settle. And fears will succeed in doing that if we let it. We can't break free from the fear that's holding us down by courageously grow. We have to courageously go through that fear, not around it. There simply isn't any other way to do it. The only way is to conquer a fear is to face it honestly, to feel it fully, to hang on 5 minutes longer than your fear. And where do we get that courage from? How do we face up to that fear that wants to keep us down? Where does that courage come from? Well, part of courage comes from inside of us. It's a discipline. It's a pattern that we develop with practice and so forth. Starting with tiny acts of courage, of doing a small thing that you don't want to do, of whittling away at your fears little by little. That part of courage is very human, like any discipline. It's hard, it takes effort, but it bears fruit, you see. That small step, approaching in small ways, and then growing. Every time you confront somebody whose behavior bothers you, every time you stand up for someone or for yourself, every time you choose to ask for help with a problem instead of trying to deal with it yourself, that builds your human courage. It takes a bite out of your fears. Human courage has done some good things. Even a small voice can make a difference. In 2004, Viktor Yushchenko was running for the presidency of Ukraine. Vehemently, he was opposed by the party, the ruling party. Yushchenko's face was disfigured, and he almost lost his life when he was mysteriously poisoned. That was not enough to deter him, though, from running for the presidency. On the day of the election, Yushchenko in the polls was comfortably ahead. The ruling party, not to be denied, however, tampered with the results. The state-run television reported, "Ladies and gentlemen, we announce challenger Viktor Yushchenko has been decisively defeated." In the lower right-hand corner of the TV screen on that night was a woman by the name of Natalia Dmitruk. And she was providing a translation service for the deaf community. A news reporter regurgitated the lies from the regime. Natalia Dmitruk refused to translate what the reporter was reading. And instead, she signed these words: "I'm addressing all the deaf citizens of Ukraine. They are lying, and I'm ashamed to translate these lies. Yushchenko is really our president." The deaf community sprang into gear. They texted their friends and sharing about this fraudulent result. And the news spread of Dmitruk's act of defiance, increasing the number of journalists who were speaking and telling the truth. Over the weeks, something called the Orange Revolution occurred as 1 million people wearing orange made their way to the capital city, demanding a new election. The government was forced to meet their demands, and a new election was held, and sure enough, Viktor Yushchenko became the next president of Ukraine. That kind of determination is important. It's an important part of human courage. But honestly, that kind of courage can only go so far. Ultimately, even the strongest human courage is going to bump up against its limitations. Philip Yancey, a Christian writer, wrote about that situation, and he wrote these words. When I heard the story behind the Orange Revolution, the image of a small screen of truth in the corner of the big screen became for me an ideal picture of the church. You see, we as a church do not control the big screen. Go to any magazine rack or turn on the television and you see a consistent message. What matters is how beautiful you are, how much money you have or power you have. Similarly, through the world, many poor people rarely make the magazine covers or the news shows. Rather, we focus on the super rich, the well-known. Our society is hardly unique, though. Through the history of nations, it's always glorified the winners, not the losers. And then, like the sign language translator in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, along comes somebody by the name of Jesus, who says, in effect, don't believe what the big screen is telling you. They're lying. It's the poor who are blessed. It's the mourners who are blessed too. Those who hunger and thirst and are persecuted. Those who go through life thinking that they're on top, more often than not, end up on the bottom. Those who go through life feeling that they're on the bottom, end up on the top. After all, what does it profit a person to gain the whole world and to lose their soul? And that's what we have to ask God for, is God's kind of courage. There's a bumper sticker that says these words: courage is fear that has said its prayers. Courage is fear that has said its prayers. In the end, real courage comes out of prayer, because it's something you can only ask for, something only God can give. We see that in Moses. We see that in David. And we see that in many others throughout the Scriptures. Jesus didn't say, hey, have courage because you're strong inside, because you're tough, because you're grown up, because you can take it. Jesus said, have courage because I have overcome the world. Have courage because God is stronger than the devil. Have courage because with Christ, you're on the winning side, no matter what happens. During the deepest and darkest days of apartheid in South Africa, the South African government tried to shut down the opposition by canceling a political rally. Archbishop Desmond Tutu declared that instead of having a political rally, he would hold a church service. And St. George's Cathedral in Cape Town, South Africa, was filled with worshipers. Outside the cathedral, hundreds of police gathered, a show of force, quite frankly, meant to intimidate. As Tutu was preaching inside, the police entered the cathedral, armed, and came alongside walls. Many of them took out their notebooks and recorded what Tutu was saying. But Tutu would not be intimidated. He preached against the evils of apartheid, declaring that it could not endure. And at one extraordinary point, he addressed the police along the sidewalls. He said to them these words: "You are powerful. You are very powerful, but you are not gods. I serve a God who will not be mocked. So since you've already lost, I invite you today to come and join the winning side." And with that, the congregation erupted in song and dance. The police didn't know what to do. Their attempts at intimidation had failed, overcome by the Archbishop's confidence that God and his goodness would triumph over evil. It was but a matter of time. Jesus said, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world, he says, you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. In Jesus' name, amen.